saying that PACAF has sent this this letter around. Leaders of the base are instructed: do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. And they go on. The unauthorized examples of unauthorized language are male, female, youngest, oldest, he, she. But you're saying that that was not an official communication. That has not been a directive. That
is not an official communication from the HAF. Correct.
Okay. And so your position to me is today that is not policy, and that they have not been so instructed.
That is correct.
This is a social media
policy
kerfuffle. I mean, this is not real. It's not happening.
So let's call it what it is. That was insane. A United States senator sat in a formal military hearing and had to ask a question that should never even be on the table. Why is the U.S. military discussing banning basic words like he and she? But the craziest part isn't even that the report existed, it's that the general didn't instantly dismiss it as absurd. Instead, we got the careful dodge. Oh, it wasn't official policy. Oh, it was exaggerated online. Oh, it was just a local decision. But think about what that really implies. That means someone in leadership, someone responsible for preparing Americans for war, actually believed this was worth doing. Meanwhile, troops are living in housing filled with mold, recruiting numbers are falling, global threats are rising, and military leadership is being dragged into arguments over pronouns. That's why Hawley's question landed like a sledgehammer. How does this make us more lethal? Because it doesn't. It doesn't help soldiers. It doesn't improve readiness. It doesn't win battles. It's pure distraction, and a costly one. And that's the real issue here. This isn't about one email. It's about what the institution is choosing to prioritize. And the fact that it took a senator exploding in frustration just to restore basic common sense tells you everything. Now let's break down what this moment really exposes about the Pentagon, its priorities, and where the military is heading next.
Thank you very much to the ranking member, and thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to the witnesses for being here. General Stitt, let me talk with you. Let me start with you, if I could. I have spoken repeatedly with the Secretary of the Army about replacing aging homes at Fort Leonard Wood in my home state, and there is no doubt in my mind that service members deserve better than they are getting right now. I was just there a few weeks ago. I toured the homes myself. I spoke to residents. I spoke to spouses. I spoke to children who lived in the homes. These homes need to be replaced. What concerns me is the Army doesn't seem to have a plan to replace this aging housing stock. So let me just ask you this. In your opinion, how does the availability or maybe lack of availability of quality military housing for service members and their families affect recruiting and retention?
Senator Hawley, good afternoon. The Army takes the care and quality of life of all of our service members and their families very seriously. So we are making and committed to investing in our housing within not just that, but within our daycare centers, child care, offering opportunities, expanding beyond that for spousal employment, to put kind of a whole package on the table to ensure that our facilities and our care and commitment towards family members is first class.
When you say a whole package, when will we be seeing this package?
Senator, we continue to work on it, and I can take that question for the record, please.
Well, that's fine. I mean, but let me just say again, for the record, I've said this in the full committee, I'll say it again here, that I think we're past the point of continuing to kick this down the road. I mean, this is a problem now. Frankly, at Fort Leonard Wood, it was a problem a decade ago. But listen, I've been there. I mean, I've seen it myself. I've talked to the service members myself. I've been in their houses. I've been in their kitchens. I've looked at their bathrooms where there's mold growing. I've seen that they don't have places for their kids. I've seen the substandard living conditions, and it just isn't acceptable, General. You know what? I promised those service members that I'd be a royal pain in the you-know-what until something changed. So I'm keeping that commitment. And I'm going to continue it until something changes. And frankly, I've heard this now it's going on 2 years. I've only been in the Senate 3, but I've heard it continuously that, well, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. Well, at Fort Leonard Wood, we haven't gotten to it. And I bet, if we went around the table here, I bet that the other members of the subcommittee would have the same situation in their state. So I'll give you the question for the record, but I just want to put on notice again, and you can take this back, that I want to see some progress on this, and I want to see it soon. And what I don't want to see are any more commitments from the Army that they're going to spend X number of dollars. This happened last year. We're going to commit X number of dollars to Fort Leonard Wood, and then as it turns out, $0 were spent on housing. I'm still ticked off about that. And I don't want to see it happen again, and I want to see progress made. So that's my piece. I think you understand where I'm coming from. General Miller, let me come to you. Can you help me with something here? Anderson Air Force Base, I understand, this is in Guam, of course. Leaders there recently received an official email that prohibited them from using pronouns or descriptors like he, she, youngest, oldest, male, or female. Why is that? I mean, what's going on?
Senator Hawley, thank you for that question. Actually, that is, we've been talking a lot about that because it was an email, from my understanding, that went out locally from one of the commanders there, and I don't remember at what level. I don't know if it was a group commander or the wing commander there. I believe that it was a Facebook post that went out based on a question. It is not the Air Force policy to not use pronouns. And so I think it was a social media, exacerbated by individuals that said that they were directed for that.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's progress. So you're saying, I'm looking at a news article here published August 31, 2022, saying that PACAF has sent this letter around. Leaders of the base are instructed, do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. And they go on, the unauthorized, examples of unauthorized language are male, female, youngest, oldest, he, she. But you're saying that that was not an official communication, that has not been a directive.
That is not an official communication from the HAF, correct.
Okay. And so your position to me is today that is not policy and that they have not been so instructed.
That is correct.
This is a social media
policy.
kerfuffle. I mean, this is not real. It's not happening.
I don't know if it's not happening, but it is not an official policy from the Department of the Air Force.
Okay. I ask because part of the way it's been reported is that the rationale is to help with lethality and also recruiting. And it was curious as heck how not using he, she can help with lethality and how it's helping with recruiting. But I take your word for it that this is not policy, and that satisfies me. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
This wasn't just another viral clip. It wasn't just a senator landing a punchline in a hearing room. This was something deeper, a snapshot of what's happening inside the U.S. military right now. Because what Josh Hawley did was simple. He dragged the conversation back to reality. And reality is this: the American military is not a university classroom. It is not an HR office. It is not a testing ground for social theories. It exists for one reason: to be the most effective fighting force on Earth. That's the mission. That's the purpose. That's the entire point. So when Americans hear that commanders may be restricting basic words like male, female, he, she, they're not reacting out of politics. They're reacting because it signals something worse: confusion at the top, misplaced priorities, leadership drifting away from warfighting and sinking into bureaucracy. And Hawley understood exactly what this moment represented. That's why he didn't just ask, "What happened?" He asked the only question that matters: how does this help us win? How does this make us stronger? Because every moment spent policing language is a moment not spent preparing for real threats. And those threats are very real. China isn't sitting around debating pronouns. Russia isn't holding sensitivity workshops. They're not doing trust exercises. They're building weapons, testing missiles, studying weakness, and America cannot afford a military distracted by nonsense. But what made this exchange even more revealing was the general's response. Pay attention to what she didn't say. She didn't say, "That's unacceptable." She didn't say, "That will never happen under my leadership." Instead, it was cautious, carefully worded, bureaucratic. Oh, it wasn't official. Oh, it was misunderstood. Oh, social media exaggerated it. Okay, but honestly, that explanation might be even worse. Because if it wasn't Pentagon policy, that means someone at a lower level came up with it themselves. A commander genuinely believed banning basic language was helpful, and that should alarm people, because it reveals the mindset. It shows what kind of ideas are circulating inside the command structure. And Hawley wasn't letting it slide. He said what millions of Americans were thinking. How does banning he and she increase lethality? That question hit like a hammer because it exposed how absurd this has become. It forced everything back to basics: winning wars, defending the country, keeping troops alive. But here's what most people missed. This hearing wasn't only about culture. It started with something even more serious: military housing. Hawley opened with mold, crumbling walls, families living in conditions that wouldn't be acceptable in rundown apartments, let alone on American bases. He brought up Fort Leonard Wood. He went there himself. He walked through those homes. He saw the bathrooms. He spoke to spouses. He spoke to children. And what did leadership offer in return? The usual script. We're working on it. We're committed. We'll look into it. Translation: nothing changes. The bureaucracy continues. The families keep waiting. And Hawley was furious because this isn't new. The Army has promised funding before. They made announcements. They said the right words. And then $0 were spent. Zero. So look at the contrast. Military families are dealing with mold. Recruiting is collapsing. Retention is slipping. Enemies are rising. And somewhere in the system, commanders are worried about whether someone says he or she. That's what Hawley was exposing. Not one email, not one isolated incident, a pattern. A military bureaucracy more focused on optics than outcomes, more focused on language than living conditions, more focused on political trends than battlefield readiness. That's why the clip exploded online, because it wasn't polished, it wasn't scripted, it was raw frustration. Someone finally saying out loud, "What are we doing? What are our priorities?" Because the truth is simple. A military cannot afford confusion. It cannot afford distraction. It cannot afford leadership treating war like a workplace seminar. The stakes are too high. So the question for every American watching becomes very clear. Do we want a military built for victory or a military built for vocabulary enforcement? Because one of those wins wars and the other gets people killed. And the next part is even bigger, because this isn't isolated. This is spreading across institutions, and what Hawley did here may be the beginning of a much larger fight over what the U.S. military is truly meant to be. So let's talk about what this signals and what comes next.